Good afternoon and welcome to this webinar, The Safety Selfie. It's time to take a snapshot of your safety program and contemplate what others see. This event is brought to you by ISHN and sponsored by All-Star Incentive Marketing. I'm your moderator, Maureen Paraventi, web editor of ISHN. Thanks for joining us. Today's presenter is Brian Golinek. Brian is president of All-Star Incentive Marketing and an ASSE member. He is one of only 35 certified professionals of incentive marketing. He's also the former president of the Incentive Technology Council. All-Star Incentive Marketing has been in business more than 40 years, and it's one of the nation's top suppliers of safety recognition and rewards programs. It is a past winner of the IMA Circle of Excellence Award for Best Safety Incentive Program. Now, before we begin the presentation, a few housekeeping items. At the bottom of your screen, you will see a taskbar. Each icon on the taskbar is assigned to a particular element of today's webinar. To find out what an icon does, just hover over it with your mouse. A box will pop up that tells you the function. A copy of today's presentation is located in the handouts icon. And please take our survey following the webinar by clicking on the survey icon in the taskbar. Below the presenter photo, you're going to see a blank questions box. Feel free to type your questions in the box and then hit the submit button to send it to us. Later in the webinar, Brian will address as many questions as possible. Today's event is being recorded and archived on www.ishn.com. All registered participants will receive an email within 1 to 2 business days that has a link to view a recording of the event. And now, I'm happy to turn it over to today's presenter, Brian Golinek.
Thank you, Maureen, and thank you for the introduction. Welcome, everybody. There's a lot of you on the line today, so there's definitely some interest in the topic, which is wonderful. Welcome to the Safety Selfie. That image you see there on the screen is a selfie of me, and just using it as a visual way of introducing today's program. Next slide. What we're going to talk about. First of all, we're going to get some scores in. Most of you, all of you, hopefully received via email a list of questions, 10 simple questions, quick answer questions, and maybe you've already prepared that ahead of time and come up with your selfie score. If you have, sit tight while we get the others to quickly calculate theirs, and then we're going to enter those scores and people on the line can see where they stand relative to their peers. Following that, we're going to dive into 10 topics that you can see there on screen and wrap it up with some Q&A and show you some resources. So starting with the safety selfie questions. These are questions that we've developed over the years. Again, we've been around for 40 years. I've been around for 27 of them, developing and building and managing full-service safety recognition reward programs. And these are the topics and the questions we think that matter the most in terms of developing where we stand from a safety perspective. If you have a scratch pad around, if you haven't already prepared your answers to these, for those of you on the line that haven't, just grab a little scratch pad and just quickly write down 5 numbers to answer these questions. So the first question, how strong is your company's safety brand name? Okay, if you don't have one, if you have nothing, no brand name wrapped around safety, give yourself a 1. If you have a great brand name and everybody knows what it is, give yourself a 5. Next question, how engaged is management in your safety objectives and initiatives? 1 if there's no engagement, 5 if it's total engagement. To what degree, and snap out, just quick answers. Don't spend too much time mulling it over. Just write down a number very quickly, and we'll get to a total score. To what degree do you use technology currently to support your safety efforts? Next question: how significantly is your company's wellness program utilized by employees? If you don't have a wellness program, circle a 1. If you have one and it's fully integrated into your safety culture, give yourself a 5. And last question here: how frequently do you provide recognition for accomplishments of your workers? Again, 1 to 5 scale. Another 15 seconds on this slide, and then we're going to toggle to the next one. 5 more quick questions, and then we'll get on to the answers, totaling up the scores. How often do you give workers non-financial tangible rewards? Again, if you never do that, that's a 1. 5 if it's frequently, and again, these are tangible. So whether it's a sweatshirt or points that lead to golf clubs or a TV, something tangible. Something other than a pat on the back or cash. How strong is your internal communication campaign with your workers? If you think it's weak, give yourself a 1. Obviously, if you think it's a great campaign to stay in touch with your workers, give yourself a 5. How quickly can your company react to changes in your safety environment? Again, a 1 to 5 scale. How would you rate your safety training program? And last question, how good is your company at measuring all relevant data, leading and trailing indicators? So again, hang here for just another 5 seconds or so. For those of you that are scoring this right now, or we're doing this right now, you should have 10 numbers on the page. Quickly add them together if you would. For those of you who prepared ahead of time, here's your first poll question. And that poll question, or your only poll question really, is what is your safety selfie score? You got some check boxes there that you can work with, right? 46 to 50, 41 to 45, and so on and so forth. So total up your score, figure out which category you're in, and check that box. I can see them coming in right now, fast and furious, which is great. A lot of good, interaction on the phone here and on the webinar. I really appreciate it. Keep plugging them in. We'll give you another, 20 or 30 seconds here. Make sure we get statistically significant results, and then we're going to go ahead and push them out the door. When we do push them out the door, you'll obviously be able to get a reflection of where you stand relative to others on the line. And I can tell you that after the webinar, if anybody's interested in seeing the full results blended in with the webinar itself, and if you're interested in seeing the deck itself, we'll be happy to push that out to everyone so you can see that as well, and again, see where you stand relative to others on the line here. So that's a pretty good amount of answers. Why don't we go ahead and push it? So what you can see here is, from a percentage standpoint, we have 31 to 35 is our biggest category, and then slightly, just 36 to 40 and 26 to 30 run pretty close to each other at 22 and 19%. So you'd have to sit here and look at this and say the average, I guess, is probably around the 30 mark, right? In a possible score of 50, the average is around 30, partially driven as well by the fact that we have 13% down there in the 21 to 25 and 20 and below, and very few people up there in the 41 and above category. Congratulations to you, you 10% roughly that are in that 41 and up category. Obviously, we think you're scoring well, and we'll go ahead and toggle to the next slide, and we'll show. This is pretty much where we come down on this based on experience. Again, many years of running many programs for dozens of companies, and looking at the culture, and not just for the companies that we run programs for, but also those that we interact with. Was mentioned early on by Maureen that we're an ASSE member. We're very active in all of the local, not just local, all of the safety shows. I write an awful lot of articles for the safety publications, and we're very plugged in. And really, from all of the work that we've done looking at these categories, if you got to 46 to 50, you've got what I would consider to be probably, you have the evidence of an outstanding safety culture. Because frankly, I believe you're doing a great many of the things it takes to get there. And you can see for yourself how that would work its way down the scale. And obviously, there's work to be done. Truly, in any case, there's work to be done unless you scored a 50. But there's lots of work to be done if you're down there in that average or below average range. That little statement at the bottom, something I just plugged in, it's your perception versus their perception versus reality, right? The whole idea behind the safety selfie was to take a look and try to see what your safety program looks like from someone's eyes other than yourself. You have a perception of your safety program, and it's accurate to whatever degree it can be. Your workers have a perception of that safety program. Your managers have a perception of your overall safety program, and then reality, of course, is always some combination. But it helps to try to step outside your normal sphere of influence, try to score yourself in these categories and maybe some others that you would derive yourself, and then try to figure out where you might be room for improvement. So that gives you some idea of where you stand relative to those on the line. And again, statistically here, we've got an awful lot of people on this call, and therefore you can really expect that where you are there is statistically significant relative to the rest of the crowd. We're going to jump now into the 10 topics that the webinar was meant to address, and we had some technical difficulties. By the way, technology is going to be one of the areas I'm talking about. We had some trouble. Otherwise, if we didn't, you'd been looking at some video. But if the screens don't move as fast as I talk, and I do talk fast, my apologies, it will eventually catch up. So the 10 topics, the first one we want to start with is safety as a valuable brand. Safety as a valuable brand. Not necessarily a common concept, right? But when you think about any product that you use in your daily life, okay, I don't care if it's the iPod or the Apple phone in your hands, or the shoes you wear, or the movie theater you go to, or the insurance company you use, take your pick. Very rarely would you be using one of those types of products or services that is not branded, right? If you think about anything in your daily life, you look about 95% of all products in the world have a brand name of some sort. Yes, there are some bags of potato chips that are big and white and have black letters on them that say potato chips, but that's the exception, not the rule. People are attracted to brands. In fact, I mentioned that I write articles for the industry. I'm writing one right now about safety brand, and in doing so, just looking into it, there are a lot of different studies that show that at least 10% of a product's value comes from its brand and its brand name, and it's well north of that in some categories. I think McDonald's, if every McDonald's in the world was rebranded tomorrow as, burger stand, they would lose a lot more than 10% of their business, right? So brand matters. And your safety programs are no different than any other product out there. It's something you need to sell. It's something you need to promote, okay? So if you haven't already put a brand name on your safety program, you should. And it should reflect the company's beliefs, that second bullet point there. Align it with your goals and objectives. Safety brands should be communicated. We're going to talk about communication as its own category, but once you've created this brand, don't hide it. Don't leave it tucked away in some drawer. Put it out there and promote it as a brand and get people thinking about safety as part of a brand within your company. It needs to be ubiquitous. It needs to be everywhere. I talked about promoting and communicating it, but don't turn down an opportunity to use that brand name in your materials and your programs and in your efforts. And it must be protected. Like all other valuable brands, there will be efforts potentially out there to glom onto it and to dilute it, perhaps within your own company. Your human resources or operations department might love what you've done, and you may want to bring them on board, and I'll talk about that more in a minute, but you certainly want to be careful with how that brand is protected and treated in its environment to protect it as the valuable asset that it is. Next category here we want to talk about is management input and support. I think it goes without saying that you need it, right? But you don't just need management input and support. You also, in other words, not just your direct supervisor, not even strictly just the C-suite. I mean, everybody wants that, right? Everybody wants their senior vice presidents and presidents to sign off on and have buy-in to what they're doing from a safety perspective. But where else do you need support, and where else can it sink your ship if you don't have it, okay? So safety, in my experience, is either its own department rolling right up to senior management. Sometimes it rolls up to HR. Sometimes it rolls up to operations. Sometimes risk rolls up to one and safety rolls up to the other. But we've seen it all different ways. But the bottom line is there are people in human resources that even if they're not your main or your primary boss or your direct contact, they can have a positive or negative effect on your program. There are people in operations, again, maybe not in direct line with your reporting channel, but they can have an obvious effect on your program. Customer service, sales. I mean, you have plenty of companies out there whose sales team is also driving around, let's say, making deliveries to convenience stores and grocery stores. They're responsible for sales, but they're certainly responsible for being safe as well. And aligning with sales and coordinating where the objectives are both sales and safety is something that needs to happen. So, the stakeholders here need to be addressed, and of course the employees themselves. The program, it's a misnomer to think the program is simply there to address employee concerns or to improve the employee experience. They are stakeholders here as well, and you need to be very, very cognizant of that and making sure the programs are designed in that way. Next topic of discussion here, technology, and as I call this slide, technology is your friend. I don't have to tell anybody on this call that technology is everywhere and continuing to grow at a scary pace, frankly. And I'm a technology guy, but I'm blown away by what I see out there. The screenshot here has just a handful of things from internet chat rooms to, to LinkedIn, social network screens, to obviously monitoring devices that are now very, very prominent in trucks and what have you. Fill in the blank from smartphones to internet access to basic things like email and text messaging and everything else under the sun. I mean, even if you want to get crazy, drones and some of the other stuff that's out there now. Technology is enveloping us, it's surrounding us, it's becoming part of us, and I mean literally part of us. And, there's a couple different types of people out there. There are technology lovers, and they can be very useful, particularly in an employee group when you're looking for volunteers to help champion causes that relate to technology. And there's technology haters. My father, for one, is the kind of guy, he's in his 70s, and when he goes to a Little League game and he sees kids parents out there on the side of the field looking at their smartphones instead of looking at their kids on the ball field, he has a hard time with it, and I understand why. But I'm not here to pass judgment on how it's used. I'm here to tell you that if you don't use it in the proper way or make the most possible uses of it, then you're really missing the boat here. So consider every piece of technology that integrates with your platform and figure out whether or not you're using it to its fullest capacity. Next topic, wellness. Now, wellness is, in wellness programs and what have you, they are definitely, they've definitely risen, I guess I'd say, in the last 5 to 10 years in prominence within companies. They're very often created out of an HR department. And frankly, they're either promoted consistently and utilized consistently, or very often they tend to fall by the wayside. As I sit here right now, I'm wearing a Fitbit because my own company is in the middle of a weight loss competition. And if you saw my picture on the front cover there, you can tell just by looking at my cheeks I could stand to lose a few pounds. So we have a weight loss competition, and we're also having a step competition at the same time. And my employees have been doing this now for years, and they absolutely embrace it. You see there on the screen, screenshots again of a Fitbit with reporting capability showing how many steps, how many hours of sleep, how many glasses of water you might have drank that given night. But how does that relate to safety? Why would I bring this up specifically in this context? If your company is reasonably large or even medium sized, it's almost certainly to have at least the shell of a wellness program. Okay, say the shell, because again, most companies have them. I think the statistics are about 75% of all companies say they have some sort of wellness program, and most of those programs are underutilized, and many of them, might work well for a while, but then kind of fall off a little bit. You can, and I suggest you try to, if it's feasible, sort of, weave your way into that wellness program for your own benefit, especially if you scored on the higher end of the scale, at those 41s and up in that safety selfie. If your company has a wellness program and you can get yourself involved in it and use some sort of recognition reward component to do the best you can with it, I would strongly encourage you to get it woven into the mix from a safety perspective. Why? Because we know obviously that obesity runs rampant in this country, and that obesity leads to sleep apnea, and sleep apnea leads to tired driving, and tired driving leads to accidents. We know that hypertension, high blood pressure, diabetes, any of these numbers of other afflictions have a huge impact on employees' ability to get to work on time, or absenteeism in general. We know that when employees are absent, it puts pressure on all the other workers. Very often you have somebody driving an irregular route or working an irregular shift or construction or what have you, and they're less safe than the person they're filling in for. So all of these things, directly or indirectly, contribute to safety. And wellness is, recognition is something I'm going to talk more about, in engagement. Wellness is a great way to engage with people and to recognize them for their efforts and to keep them tied in with company goals and objectives. So, right on cue, recognition is imperative. We have seen from previous webinars that there's a huge dichotomy between reality and perception. So the graphic on the right there, very simple graphic, comes from the Human Capital Institute, shows that about 11% of workers are highly engaged at work. Okay, another percentage are engaged, but not engaged at a very high level, and the supermajority are not engaged at all. And we'll come back to another study that really reflects that. This has been done over and over again, and the numbers always come in the same. The vast majority of U.S. workers are not engaged at work. The graphic on the left there, it's not wonderfully labeled, but I'll tell you what that reflects. The green section, 50 to 74%, was the most common answer given by attendees of our previous webinars. So I've asked this question: what percentage of your workforce do you think is highly engaged or even just engaged? I've asked that on a number of previous webinars, and the most prominent answer is 50 to 74%. So people like you that have attended previous webinars, think that the majority of you think that 50 to 74% of your workforce is highly engaged, and then you look at the 75 to 100%, and well over half the people who have attended these calls, and there's hundreds, thousands actually over the number of calls I've done this, well over half think that a huge percentage of their workforce is highly engaged, and the truth is the exact opposite. And so when you have perception that they're highly engaged and a reality that they're not, and it's almost everybody guesses higher than reality is, then you have an engagement problem. And engagement is addressed first and foremost through recognition. So when you look at, just to come to another study here, Gallup's State of the American Workplace, this might be the largest ongoing study in U.S. history. I don't even know. I know they've talked to, literally gotten results from hundreds of millions of people over the years. It's been running for a long time. It's a 12-question survey. And if you ever want to look it up for yourself, go ahead and do so. It's a 68-page survey that they append every year. There's 12 questions, and I've highlighted a few of them there on screen, right? In the last 7 days, I have received recognition or praise for doing good work, yes or no? My supervisor or someone at work seems to care about me as a person, yes or no? The mission or purpose of my company makes me feel my job is important, right? These are all questions that are asked in the survey along with others along the same lines, and they extrapolate from this the level of engagement within those companies, within those workers. From that extrapolation, they're able to actually tell us that 50% of everybody who answered this is not engaged. And here's the real scary one. 20% are what they called actively disengaged. Couldn't care less, I guess is the way I'd paraphrase it. 70% either not engaged or even worse, actively disengaged, and about 30% engaged. Okay? So the conclusion they've come to, which I think tells a huge story, and again, this is based on real significant data, is that 50% fewer accidents, 41% fewer quality defects, and far less in healthcare costs in companies that have high levels of engagement. So when they can separate the two, when they get the results and they say, okay, here's this company, and they have a super high level of engagement, those companies have fewer accidents, fewer injuries, fewer quality defects, fewer healthcare costs, lower healthcare costs, lower turnover. And the final sentence of the whole thing is basically that so having too few engaged employees means our workplaces are less safe, employees have more quality defects, and disengagement is higher, okay, which also drives up the company's healthcare costs. All right, so this is a pretty good indication that, you know, engagement is something that needs to be taken on. And it would be very easy and really reasonable for you to sit there and say, okay, but that's engagement, that's human resources, that's operations, that's their purview. I would benefit from it, but you know, that operations or HR or someone else should be doing this. The truth is the person who owns engagement within a company, frankly, is the manager who is closest to the level of engagement, the employees from an engagement standpoint. And if that's you, if it's your safety programs, then it's something you need to consider taking on. Okay, next topic. Tangible awards are memorable. I know, I would guess, based on previous experience, that the majority of people on the phone have heard this before, and I would say stop me if you've heard this before, but this is a one-way conversation, so you can't stop me, but I promise I'm going to hit this very briefly. Cash is a bad motivator. Cash is a bad motivator. Cash is a very bad long-term motivator. I'll grant you this, for those of you that think that that's not an accurate statement. If I said to you, if you said to your employees, everybody be safe this week and I'll give you $100 at the end of the week, that'd probably be a pretty good motivation, okay? But you'd have to do it again the next week and the week after that and the week after that, okay? If you're looking for, which I know you are, long-term, you know, 24/7, 365, year to year to year safety, you're not going to get it with cash rewards. Why? Because the minute you start giving your employees cash awards, they consider it part of their compensation. There's a bunch of other reasons, but this is the main one. And secondly, it's not memorable. Okay? You give them a cash award, you give them that $100, you go to them 3 weeks later and ask them what they did with it, and they don't know. Okay? You give somebody something else, the equivalent of $100 worth of points, and let them go get a fishing pole or something of that nature, and you can ask them 5 years later where they got the fishing pole, and they'll know. They can attach the award to the behavior and the behavior to the objectives, and as a result of that, they can figure out that safety is something they want to do on a regular basis. So you need to go away from cash, and not just cash, but things that are the same as cash. A gas card, and no offense to, you know, whoever's on the line here. Again, there's a lot of companies signed up. For all I know, I've got, you know, gas and oil companies signed up. No offense. We all need it. We all need it in our tank, but a tank of gas is not memorable. So a gas card and a Visa card, and frankly, and again, my apologies to Home Depot if you're on the line, but frankly, a Home Depot card, these are not tangible awards. These are easily forgotten awards. You might question the Home Depot card and say, well, they could go get something memorable from Home Depot. It's not the way it works, and it's not just because I say so, it's because it's been studied. If you give somebody a Home Depot card, just using that as an example, they're going to take it home, they're going to put it on the gift card shelf or wherever they store, the drawer in the desk where they store gift cards. On average, it'll sit there 6 to 9 months. When they pull it back out and use it, they've almost certainly forgotten where they got it. Even if they remember where they got it, they're going to go to Home Depot, buy light bulbs and batteries and motor oil and bags of mulch, okay? And they're going to come back home and use those products and never think for a minute that it was something they were awarded for safety. If you're going to give them something tangible, if you're going to give them an award, make it tangible, make it a sweatshirt with the company's name on it, make it a safety kit of some sort. I'll show you the ones we do. use a points-driven rewards program where they can get tangible products, but make it something that they can actually remember and attach back to the action itself. And I just mentioned safety kits. These are great, by the way, especially if the budget doesn't allow for going with a full year round program, points-driven program. These are tangible, to say the least. These are also carry that first message about branding and marketing and putting a brand name on it. The left side of the screen there, you're looking at kits that are made that carry products inside of them that carry the company's safety logos, okay? But rather than sticking them in a brown corrugated box, when we build these kits, we put them into packaging that is totally branded for the company and specifically for the company's safety message. And you can kind of get an idea just from those pictures there that you have employees, on the job, actual images of real employees on the job. You have the safety logos and messaging. You have a message from the president. On the right side of the screen, you see that these awards are given out in a public forum, very often at their safety banquets at the end of the year. And everybody who's had a totally safe year, or everybody that made a valid safety suggestion, or mentored a new employee, or did driver training, or completed their training with a score of X or better, is recognized or rewarded in a room full of people, in front of their peers, in front of their families very often. Those screenshots on the right come from a video, and anybody who wants to see a link to the video that shows this program in full form, I'd be happy to send it to them. But in the video, you can actually see family members in the crowd holding up their phones, taking videos and pictures of their spouse receiving the safety award. That's memorable. That's tangible. Inside those boxes are our sunglasses, safety rated, of course. There's thermal jugs and coolers and lapel pins and hats and pins and patches and just really high quality, good products that these people will use, employees will use, and they'll take pride in remembering how they received them. All right, next topic, and I've touched on this one a bit, but let me just hit it again, Ubiquitous Communications. I think the graphic is great, that young lady there surrounded by all of the possible ways in which messaging can get to her. There's really, from my perspective, and this is just kind of the way I frame it in my own mind, there's four things that you need to think about from a communication standpoint, all right? The first is that the message must get through. I mean, the real first is you need to develop a message, but beyond that, the message has to get through. You can develop a great message, and then and then you can just kick back and say, oh, I got a great message, that's awesome, but it has to get through. Well-intended messages are wasted if not received. So once you got your message, you have to really contemplate all the ways in which you're going to get it through to that audience. The next is the message needs to be understood. It's fantastic that you know what it means. You're the one developing the message, but are you sure that your workforce is going to understand what it means? And if not, what would you do differently to tweak that message? And how do you get your managers to convey, your line level managers to convey the message properly as well if they're part of the communication channel, and they should be, right? So it's got to get through. It has to be understood. All avenues need to be utilized, right? And think outside the box. If you sit there and say, well, we have meetings and we have an internal newsletter and we email everybody. Okay, well, what else you got? Do you have cell phones for people? Is there any reason text messaging is bad? Maybe. Maybe you got drivers on the road. Well, don't text them while they're driving. Okay, fine. But maybe it's usable in other environments. Have you printed anything? The OSHA poster hanging on your wall is not getting a lot of attention. I think we can pretty much agree on that. Put up a poster wrapped around a recognition reward program that carries your safety messaging, and you're much more likely to get it through. I don't care if it's old world paycheck stuffers, flyers, posters, catalogs, or new world social media, chat rooms, safety suggestion programs, online or otherwise, or any of the newer technologies that are coming out. Find every way to get that message out. And then next, the message must be measured. The results must be measured, right? It's not enough to assume it got through. You need to know it got through, and you need to know if it was understood. And that comes from something else we're going to talk about, which is, among other things, surveying that audience, and or in person or online or through paper-based surveys, and finding out if they truly understood and internalized what it was you were talking about. The connection points, from a standpoint of how do you get the message out there, and I've alluded to most of these, so I won't really cover them, but you have different platforms to use, and obviously, you know what those are. You have interactions that should never be wasted. If you have tailgate, toolbox talks and tailgate meetings and pre-shift meetings, I mean, if those things are sort of, cookie-cutter events that are done the same way over and over again, stop, spend a little extra time, think about what you might do differently with those meetings, and use them to really reinforce in a face-to-face way the message that you're trying to get out there, okay? And of course, all the hardware and software and things we talked about earlier, I mentioned earlier, that are you know, usable tools for getting the message out. And one last thought on this, by the way, even as we slide to the next screen, those tools that I'm talking about, if you can get the message out through social media, if you can get it out in a web-based environment, you're much more likely to get the message to them also on their own spare time, okay? So also in a situation where they're not sitting there at work, but they're at home, maybe they're in a recognition reward program, they're in a place checking on their points and the awards they might be able to order, and they're also surrounded with a safety messaging, and you're helping to get that through at 8 o'clock at night on their own personal time because they're involved in a program they really care about. The next topic is really 3 or 4 topics rolled together. I put them as dynamic, scalable, flexible, and extendable. Essentially, what I'm talking about here is being able to adapt to change. And so, you know, as I say here, disruptions, and those can be positive or negative, but disruptions require adjustments, okay? You might have done everything right. Things are working great. And guess what? Your company just bought another company or vice versa, okay? You got a whole bunch of other locations, divisions, employees that now have to be indoctrinated into what you're doing. And, I mean, I'll tell you what you already know, but just to reinforce it, you don't have time to waste. You don't have time to waste on these things. So if there's something that stops you from being nimble, and maybe a lot of things, could be your manager or management in general, and, you know, God knows what else. But, you know, again, spend some time, hire an outside resource to help you figure out how you can adapt and react quickly, right? And again, not just negative things or neutral things. You know, obviously, if we have a major accident, there's things that need to be done. I don't just mean, you know, investigation and audit processes and what have you. There's other things that need to be done to reset morale and expectations going forward. But you also have, you know, if you've reached major milestones, let's say that you set out this year to have a 10% drop in claims by targeting proactive safe behavior and rewarding people for doing those things. Let's say you come back at the end of the year and you got a 12% drop in claims. Don't sweep it under the rug. Don't talk about it over coffee with your boss and that's it. Put it out there, crow about it, and then use that as a launch pad for the next wave of that program to make it even better. New projects, new deadlines, new operational issues, government regulations and more government regulations, and even more, because we know they just keep coming. Union contract negotiations, PPE requirements, all of these things require that you're able to adapt and change. And as I say at the bottom, a successful program should be expanded, and unsuccessful programs really need to be altered. You can't just sit there and continue to, you know, to roll that same pitcher out on the mound if he's getting shelled. You got to find a way to adapt. All right, next topic, and we're nearing the end here. Train, reinforce, and repeat. I suspect, to the extent that everybody on the line here is a safety manager or working in that vein, I don't need to tell you that training matters. What I will tell you is that where companies very often fall short is the reinforce and repeat portion of this thing. It's not just enough to train them. It's equally important, if not more important, to reinforce that training message and to repeat it. So when I talk here about best practices, first of all, in my experience, I realize that out of reality for some companies based on size and scope and scale and where the people are located, that online training is necessary, okay? But if, I don't care what the company's situation is, even if you have to use online training, you better stick a person in front of them as frequently as you can, at the very least at the end of every section, to assess how they're doing. I think the data there is absolutely complete, and training without human interaction is not nearly as effective. Reward incremental success along the way. I see this in, again, many of my companies have driver training, right? Let's just say that the driver training has 10 different sections, and each section has 10 different quiz questions. Don't get to the end of the 100th question and then see how they're doing, right? Let them take a 10-question quiz on some element of driver training or whatever the training might be. Figure out where they stand. Obviously, revisit and try to recover areas where maybe they didn't do so well, and reward those for reaching a certain level, 80, 90, or 100% success for that subsection, and do the same for the others, and then again recognize and hopefully reward them at the end for doing, and let them know that that's on the docket, because it's definitely going to get you greater attention span. We know full well that when they go into that training, they might have their cell phone in there with them. And, you know, how many of them are going to be glancing down, checking emails, checking their fantasy baseball scores, right? It's going to be, there's too many distractions in the world, and you need to compartmentalize, in my opinion, from the training perspective, use human beings and recognize and reward incremental gains. And, here's another one that I've seen happen with great success. Tie the trainer and the trainee together where it's feasible. We have companies that use behind-the-wheel instructors, BTWIs, to train their new driver trainees. And I can tell you that we had far greater success when we tied the trainer and the trainee together, again, with recognition and reward for accomplishments. So the trainee wasn't just rewarded for getting 10 out of 10 right or 100% or 90%, whatever it is, on their training quizzes. The trainer was as well for proof that they had done a great job. On the same thing with the on-the-road tests. If they passed that with flying colors, both were rewarded. And then 3 months, 6 months, and a year in these training programs, the trainee and the trainer were given bonus points if the trainee had accomplished that stretch of time accident and injury-free and obviously become a very safe worker. It helps them build a bond. One of the things you try to do here is have people want to stay on the job and stay with the company. One of the ways that happens is getting them to their 1-year anniversary. One of the ways that happens is having them make a friend on the job. Again, great data on this. If they can interact with a number of people and make a friend on the job, they're much more likely to stick around. If you just invested heavily in them to train them, and it turns out they look like they're a very good, very safe worker, last thing you want to do is lose them. Tying a couple people together in this way can be have a great effect. The reinforced piece of it, communicate continually. I've talked about that. It certainly matters here as well. Establish goals and communicate results. You don't want to, again, do this in a vacuum. You want to basically be out there telling them what the goal is for training and letting them know how they're doing relative to the pack. And then repeat, training never stops. We did a program for the World Trade Center construction site. Carbon monoxide poisoning was of particular concern, particularly working in confined spaces. They did training around carbon monoxide poisoning, and we waited 30 days and we issued a quiz as a follow-up to that and gave bonus points for people who get all the answers right. And for those that got them wrong, or at least some of them wrong, we made it very easy for them to revisit the original training material, come back in, fix their answers, and still gave them bonus points, knowing full well that we had much better compliance with that workforce, knowing how to complete that process. And measure twice, cut once. The final topic here from my perspective. I mentioned my father earlier. This is another one of his favorite topics. He used to say it to me and my brothers when we were kids, don't measure once and end up cutting twice. Do it the other way around. Measure twice and cut once. The topic here really is about measuring everything you can possibly measure. All right. Again, we get wrapped up in our daily world. The safety world is very much a measurement world, right? We measure our accidents. We measure our injuries. We measure our claim count. We know what we spend. We know what the insurance issues are. We know where we are typically from an OSHA incident rate relative to our competition. That's all great. But do you also measure engagement and morale? No, we don't measure that. That's not us. That's on human resources. Okay, go get human resources to do it. And if they won't, find a way to do it. At least pick off a couple of these and try it. Because I'll tell you, when you measure engagement, okay, let's say you're about to launch a new initiative and you measure your employee engagement using a series of questions, maybe the 12 I referred to earlier, the Gallup study. You use those questions and you assess your level of employee engagement going into this program. And then 6 months in, you check it again, and a year later, you check it again. And then you juxtapose that with the other information on the left side. How many accidents? How many claims? What's the training results? What are our training scores? What's turnover relative to lost time injuries? If lost time injuries are going up at the same time turnover is going up, you've got a pretty good indication of something you need to look at. Okay? EPS is a good one. Use that. I mean, if you can find a way to use that, I would tell you that's going to get you an audience with maybe somebody in the company you haven't had before, maybe all the way up to the president, right? Because let's face it, the C-suite cares about and is driven by, particularly in publicly traded companies, about earnings per share, about profitability, all right? And when you can go to them and say, I spent X and I saved Y, okay, and Y is twice as much as X, and it's coming out in the bottom line in earnings per share, and in subtle ways, lower turnover, a more engaged workforce, higher morale, all those things are coming through, you're going to actually have a real strong case to make to that management crew as to why safety and engagement are far more than just controlling, the negative spend levels, right? So benefits of measurement, and I'm more or less alluding to them as we've been going through here. but justify your spending, prove a return on investment, right? Empower your employees, gather their input. The great thing about communications, I didn't mention it earlier, is in today's day and age, it should be two-way, right? Communications in many companies and in many situations is simply one-directional. The company's talking to their employees, telling them what they need to do, telling them whatever. And the great thing about using some of the programs that I've alluded to here is you can get really good two-way communication where you get great input on a regular basis from your employees who are interested in giving you that input because it's only going to make the program that much better and everybody benefits. And then I mentioned about better analysis, not flying blind. And then the last one I've already kind of alluded to here, cross-pollinate, right? Cross-pollinate. Don't simply look at the same old safety data you've been looking at. Look at it and at the same time try to find a way, whether you have to produce the data or you can get it from somebody else internally, and match and marry it together with data that you can get out of your HR department about turnover, data you can get out of your operations department about other stress points in the company, and try to paint a more holistic picture of where safety fits into your safety selfie. And with that, and I mentioned my chubby cheeks before, so let me just show them to you one more time. I went ahead and, well, I didn't do it, my marketing department did, but they pasted me. I'm the one on the right with the beard. No, that's not true. I'm the other guy. Pasted me into the world's most popular safety selfie. This was, not safety selfie, but selfie. This was taken at, I think it was the Oscars, and I want to say like hundreds of millions or 1 billion people have seen this in retweets, but for what it's worth, there I am there with my Hollywood brethren. So with that, I will take some questions, and at the bottom of this presentation, and again, a presentation that's available to everybody who wants it, there are references from different data points that I gave you today, and you can certainly research those for yourself as well.
Well, thank you, Brian, for such a great presentation, and that Hollywood selfie is impressive. And now Brian will answer some of your questions. We've got some good ones rolling in. Let's start with, it is difficult to get managers to see the importance of safety in some cases. What is a great way to encourage or promote managers to support safety within their departments?
I'm going to say this. So this question is about managers, as in the managers that are. It says it's difficult. They weren't talking about senior management. It sounds like they were talking about their managers, right? The people who are actually probably deploying the program to the employees themselves. You can tell. I mean, I'm going to wear it on my sleeve here for a minute. I'm a huge believer in recognition, and for me, recognition and reward comes hand in hand. You can recognize without rewarding. Okay, but for my opinion, you should darn well be rewarding with the right type of program, avoiding cash and all the stuff I mentioned before. And if you build a reward program, you'll find yourself spending an amount of money that is well within your budget, okay, to reward people. It'll be far less money than you're spending in a lot of other ways to fix problems. And if you're going to reward your workforce for proactive safety measures, right, making safety suggestions, mentoring new employees, attendance, becoming a trainer, mentoring new employees and partnering with other people, joining safety committees, right? We can go on and on and on. But if you're going to reward people for these proactive safe behaviors and for their performance themselves, don't leave the managers out of that reward program. Okay, their most immediate, the first level up from a manager supervisor standpoint should be woven into that program as well. I mentioned the World Trade Center program earlier. In that particular case, what we did was we rewarded the employees for a lot of the things I just mentioned. We rewarded the managers for delivering their toolbox talks. We rewarded their managers for doing position papers, for turning in their behavior-based paperwork on time, right? So all of those incremental things that a manager would do that would make their workforce safer, rewarding them for those behaviors, and then, of course, reinforcing the reward side of things and the recognition side of things for employees is a way of tying the two together instead of having the managers sitting there from a somewhat, perhaps, they feel a little bit left out watching a program roll out the door and not actually being part of it. And we've done the same thing in other cases as well for a company very large company does very large distribution of groceries around the country. We called it was the Safe Ops Reward Program. Employees were rewarded for all the things I just mentioned earlier and a number of others, and the managers were rewarded, among other things, for implementation of safety suggestions. So safety suggestions come in, employees are recognized and rewarded. The better suggestions are scored by a safety committee, And when that safety committee decided that one of these suggestions should be implemented, a manager was basically said, okay, here's your budget. You have, let's say one of the examples that I always remember is painting the stairs in a dark hallway a very bright color and painting grit into them because this is in an area where snow and ice were prevalent, right? And so manager was told, you got $500 and 30 days to get it done, and if you get it done within budget and on time, you're going to earn 100 bonus points as well. And now you've got basically, a great push-pull, and you've got buy-in from both categories of employees.
Brian, another question. How do you repeat the message without it becoming so redundant that the team members tune it out?
Yeah, that is a great question. It shouldn't go out. It should never be the same message exactly repeated over and over again. It's the same brand. If you go back to the first point, that brand is not going to change from day to day and message to message because that's important. That's the thread that ties it all together. But you do competitions and contests within the program. Okay, so it's an overall recognition reward program, let's say, but it then has components within it. So the wellness program, the wellness idea I mentioned before. When you launch that, that would be something outside the box, a little bit different. Hey guys, great news. From now to the end of June, anybody that signs up for the weight loss component or the healthy eating component or the smoking cessation component can earn bonus points within the safety program for performance within those subcategories, right? June is National Safety Month. Offer everybody double bonus points for making great suggestion in the month of June. In some of our programs, we've done everything from slogan contests, right? You go out to your workforce and say, anybody if you want to suggest a safety slogan that encapsulates our workforce, everybody that makes a suggestion of a slogan is going to get 25 points, right? The top 10 suggestions are going to get 50 points, and the suggestion that is deemed the best safety slogan that really captures our workforce is going to earn 100 bonus points, and we're going to use that slogan for the next year. These are real examples, by the way. We've done kids coloring contests. Right? This is just, frankly, this is a matter of deploying, working with a company that builds these programs day in, day out and knows how to deploy them. Self-serving, I grant you, but I truly believe it, whether it's my company or somebody else's. Go to an expert who's done this over and over again. But I mentioned the kids coloring contest. This was for a company that we had a great track record of improving safety in their company, and they really wanted to push it into the home. And so we did a number of different things, and one of them was to create a kids coloring contest where on the awards site you can simply click on and download a black and white, black line drawing of daddy at work, let's say, bring it home to your kids, have them color it, send it in any number of different ways using technology or through the mail, and everybody who sent anything in got bonus points, and the best pictures were put up on the screen, and it lit up the award site like a Christmas tree, and the traffic to that site was never higher than it was when we were displaying, and by the way, this was mixed together with the safety results for the year, but the safety performance results of the company, which were fantastic, together with the kids' colored pictures that were done in conjunction with that program. So make it dynamic. Keep updating it.
Next question. How do you feel about end-of-the-year parties with door prizes?
End-of-the-year parties, great. Door prizes, Mets. A door prize, prizes in general is something I've done entire webinars on this topic, right? And I think one of my sections of a webinar was called "Toss the Hat," meaning get rid of the hat, and that's meant to really refer to this. A lot of people I talk to at safety trade shows say, "Oh yeah, we have this program, the guys love it." The guys love it is my favorite comment. I get it all the time. Well, my guys love it. We take everybody's name, we throw it in a hat, and we pull out a winner. Okay. And then that winner gets whatever they get, a pickup truck or an ATV or a trip to Hawaii. First of all, OSHA despises that, and okay, obviously you don't want to run counter to government regulations, but in this case they're right, for sure. That's not the best use of dollars. Now you might be talking about a coffee maker for all I know at a year-end banquet, and I certainly have no problem with a reasonably valuable item, tickets to your local football game or something. But I'd be cautious about giving away, going too big ticket. And I'd really be cautious about using the element of chance. A lot of safety programs, particularly going back, 20 and 30 years, were built around the element of chance. Scratch this card and maybe you'll win. Okay, well, 10 are losers, but you can throw them into a second chance thing. If you're safe on the job, or you make a great suggestion, or, you do all these things, you join a safety committee, and I give you a card, and you scratch and you don't win, and you get another one and you don't win, and nine cards later you still haven't won anything, And all I'm basically doing is reinforcing in a negative way what's gone on. It needs to be action reaction. And so I realize, by the way, this question, for whoever asked this question might be talking strictly about year-end party and a door prize. Again, reasonably priced, sure, it's fun, it helps to create buzz. But to the larger question, I would focus more on rewarding people time in, time out, at the right level, for the right behavior, and not giving them a chance to win something, knowing full well that most guys are never going to win and are going to feel slighted by it at some point.
You mentioned OSHA. The next question is about that as well. What about OSHA's concern regarding safety incentive programs?
Oh, I love this one. Dr. Michaels, he's a guy I pay attention to and read. And yes, Dr. Michaels and OSHA have concerns over safety incentive programs, but by their own words, okay, by Dr. Michaels' own words, if they're built the wrong way, okay, and ironically, I shouldn't say ironically. The U.S. government, it does a lot of things right. Obviously, it gets credit for doing a lot of things wrong. But the truth is, OSHA, maybe for the wrong reason, but nevertheless came to the right conclusion. OSHA does not say you cannot use a safety incentive program. They don't even say you can't use it in a VPP program. Okay, what they say is poorly built or improperly designed programs should not be used. And what they flag is, frankly, what we flag as well, is poorly designed programs. They're a little bit too focused, I think, on the fact that you're not supposed to reward somebody for being safe on the job. We do think that that's something you should do, at least within some component. But OSHA thinks you should be rewarding people, if you're going to use a recognition reward program, for proactively safe behavior. And if you think about what I've talked about for the last 45 minutes or so, that's most of it, right? I'm talking about recognizing and rewarding your workforce for doing a great job during training, for suggestions, for near-miss reporting, right? For employee nomination component programs. This is not going to induce, and OSHA knows this, is not going to induce any accident or injury hiding, which is what they care about. You deploy it fairly, and make sure you don't unevenly deploy it. So OSHA wants fairness. They want everybody to have a chance to earn if there's going to be a rewards program. We completely agree. They don't want really big ticket items. I give my apologies to Swift Transportation if they're on the phone, but I can't help it. I name names. Swift Transportation did for a number of years something called Thanks a Million, where they literally threw their drivers' names in a hat and pulled the name of anybody who had a completely safe year, and that became a bit of an issue to determine, as you can imagine from a legal standpoint. They threw their names in a hat, thousands of them, we know how big Swift is, and they'd pull a name out of the hat and they give the guy $1 million. Wow, what a waste of money. Now, the program got some articles early on for I think the president of the company came up with it and saying, wow, look at all the attention this is getting, but it's not a good program. They have thousands of drivers. I think it's 10 or 20,000 drivers. 9,999 guys didn't think they were going to win, and they were all right. The one guy who won, I don't know if he stuck around or not, but it doesn't really matter. They just took $1 million that could have easily motivated that entire workforce and again, essentially gave it to one guy. OSHA doesn't like that. I don't like that. That's a big waste of money. Don't pull a name out of a hat and give them a pickup truck. Don't give them a chance to win something if they performed well. Come up with a consistent program that rewards at the right level, de minimis value in any given reward, and within the confines. By the way, 274J of the U.S. tax code has been in place since the 1980s, protects safety reward programs. Okay, so the same government that has OSHA underneath it also has a tax code component to it that says that a properly designed safety incentive program is allowed, and not only is it allowed, it's tax deductible, tax-free to the employees under certain circumstances, and tax deductible to the employer. So yes, there are concerns, but if the short takeaway you had from something you heard previously was OSHA doesn't allow these or OSHA doesn't like these, it's a question of what type of program. A qualified program is something that they not only allow, they actually will encourage as long as it's focusing on proactive behavior.
A new topic here. You mentioned questionnaires, but what are some other safety program measuring tools?
Well, I mean, surveys, right? I mentioned the two-way communication. First of all, measurement. I mean, I alluded to all kinds of different measurement, during my presentation. Again, safety in general knows how to measure stuff. You guys measure stuff all day long. Maybe you've got lytics installed, and it's not just a question of knowing who's driving, who's aggressively driving and it needs to be reprimanded. But if you take a look at a score from any of these monitoring devices, what does the score suggest to you? If a score of 5 points or below for a given month is a great score, reward them for that and use that as a measurement device as well. Again, you have all the other normal measurement tools, but go knocking on the door of HR and operations and find out if they can, if they ever have, or if they would, commission an employee engagement study. One of my biggest customers does that. I love it. They do a very substantial, once a year, employee engagement study. I do it myself internally, by the way, with my own employees. But that study is meant to give them, feedback on a variety of different topics, and some of the topics change from year to year, and some of them remain the same, and so they can measure performance from one year to the next. But an employee engagement surveys in general, employee engagement survey is probably a fairly lengthy one, but within the confines of an existing recognition reward program, something that has an award site that gets tons of traffic, as they always do, you could pop up a 5-question survey once a week, and give people a couple points for answering it, spend very little money, and get great, timely feedback from the field. That's the thing I love about these programs. Just real quick aside, when you get the right program out there, one of the first programs we ever built, right, the company I built it for, because this goes back over 10 years, said, the company we built it for said, I don't know, most of my guys don't have email access. I said to them, well, the national average is like 75% at that time. It's even higher now. I said, I bet you 75% of your people have email access, and even more can get online. To make a long story short, we launched the program. We gave them online access and offline access, and 97% of everybody participated online. They captured email addresses for virtually every member of their workforce that they didn't have it for earlier. And when we looked at when people came to the award site, it was mostly in the evening hours and on the weekends on their own personal time to check out surveys and quizzes, to look at the safety-related data, to see how many points they had, and redeem for prizes. That site got 20 times more traffic than the company's intranet site got, okay? And as a result, they asked us to make the path to the award site go through the intranet so they could drive traffic there to a place where everybody's 401k and health benefits and everything else lives. So, you can get a lot of bang for your buck with a rewards program that has buzz, that actually captures their attention, that, as I said earlier, breaks through the daily clutter. And if you do, as a safety manager, you can be driving to work one day and saying, boy, I really wonder how many guys remember what we taught them last month about lockout tagout procedures, all right? And you can get to work, and in 5 minutes, particularly in a well-built solution, you can pop up a survey or quiz, and by lunchtime, have a response and figure out how well that message is resonating, and measure those results and compare them against any other measurement you want to go for. So, these are the things I would recommend.
We've got time for one more question. Is there a better job position or department to manage this program than others? Does it matter?
As it relates to safety, no. Safety is, there's nothing better than, I think, having your safety department. I mean, I've dealt with risk, and risk looks at it from a different angle, and in some cases risk and safety are tied together. But no, the crux of what I'm talking about, safety, is the place to put this program. Now, a program, some companies love to refer to something as kind of total rewards, and we have programs like that as well, right, total rewards. But and a total rewards program could emanate out of operations, as an example, and then it might encompass a whole bunch of things, right? So safety might be a component of that program, but it could also have a service award program built in, which is great, by the way. We do service award programs too. But if it emanates out of operations, and it's safety and service and wellness and attendance and any number of other things, then I'm not saying it's not good. It could be great, but it could also dilute to a certain extent the safety message. The most successful programs that I've seen created were created for safety, by us, obviously, and then where they had the full ability to pick and choose where they were willing to tie into something else. I mentioned wellness, obviously, earlier. It's a natural place to tie in, but it was basically safety's call to do that because they built and owned the program. So if somebody, if some other department of the company said, hey, we want to, I don't even know, we want to take over the site and give away Christmas gifts, the safety department could look at them and say, if they so choose to, and say, that's not going to help us get the safety message out during our most difficult driving season. We control it. We don't want to do that, and they can pick and choose where the tie-ins are. So no, I think for the context of what we're talking about, within the context of the safety selfie, if you're looking at your program, you want to be the one to create this and own it. You can do so by creating it in a very small environment. Start it off with a couple of divisions or one small region, see if it works well, tweak it, adjust it, make it bigger, and then roll it out nationally once you're sure you got the right program.
Well, this concludes today's webinar. Please join me in thanking Brian Galanik for his presentation, as well as our sponsor, All-Star Incentive Marketing. As you exit the webinar, please take a few minutes to complete our survey. Your comments help us serve you better. If you have any additional questions or comments, you can contact us at webinars@bnpmedia.com. And please visit webinars.ishn.com for the archive of this presentation, as well as information about our upcoming events. Thanks so much for your time. We hope you find this webinar to be a valuable experience.